Welcome all of you to our ongoing discussion of this amazing technology, generative AI. This webinar is the foundation of an ongoing series we are planning where we will revisit the concept discussed today every few months in a shorter 15 or 20-minute format to update everyone on what has changed since the last event. Today, we will begin by creating a base of knowledge around AI so that you understand the terms and technologies involved. We will then attempt to narrow down the multitude of AI products to those that may be most applicable to businesses utilizing Microsoft, Google, Oracle NetSuite, or Salesforce products today, including diving into the mainstream chatbots and how they compare to each other. We'll then dip our toes in the prompt engineering pool to build a foundation of understanding about this critical new skill set. We'll shift gears and discuss concerns around this technology, including responsible design and ethics issues. We'll then refocus on how you can use generative AI today. We'll continue with how to assess your AI maturity and opportunities for enhancing AI deployments. In the home stretch, we'll clarify that AI is much more than generative AI and leave you with steps you can take in your overall AI journey, and then specifically for any Copilot dreams you may have. Laura will then take us home by discussing next steps, and I'll leave you with a list of sources of information to keep you up with it all. So let's start off with a brief history lesson. Even though some that have not been involved with technology may think that AI was born this time last year, in reality, AI has been around for over 60 years. The 1956 program called the Logic Theorist was the first AI program built to solve math problems. And in the 50s, the Turing test was developed as one definition of AI as the concept that to be considered AI, a user must interact with the computer and not be able to distinguish it from interacting with a human. We then had the 60s where earlier robotics happened. In the 70s, there were new algorithms derived. In 1980s, we have our little guy Clippy there that got created and other intelligent assistants. In the 90s, machine learning took off, and we had Big Blue, IBM's computer, that defeated the best chess player at the time in 1997. And then, of course, the 2000s, we had natural language processing and vision and speech breakthroughs. 2010s is really where this all started to make a big change with the increases or the improvements in deep learning. You had your AI assistants such as Siri, Alexa, and Google emerge. And then, of course, that leads us to today, the large language models that emerged in the 2020s. So why today? Why generative AI today? There's three key advances that have made this possible right now in history. And these would include your data, the availability of large amounts of data, or the internet, the availability of scalable and reasonable price powerful computer systems. Thank you, NVIDIA, for doing that, and breakthroughs in neural network architecture. As this chart shows, the time to 100 million users in recent technologies is truly unprecedented with ChatGPT, with the internet being 7 years, mobile phones 16, Facebook 4.5, and then of course ChatGPT being 2 months. Indications are that generative AI is being embraced at a breakneck pace, outstripping the gradual adoption of earlier technological milestones like the internet. Therefore, companies that hesitate to adopt may find themselves at a stark competitive disadvantage. Now, this technology changes literally every day. And as I was preparing this presentation, just this week, IDC released one of the first kind of litmus tests on whether this stuff is really making any waves in the economy. And in that report, the people that responded to it reported that they were realizing a return on their investment in about 14 months on average. That the main the use cases that they were going to be using with this was going to be copywriting, running simulations, and automating business processes and workflows. That every $1 that a company invests in AI, they were realizing $3.50 in return. That over 60% of companies are already using some form of generative AI, and another 24% plan to do that in the next 2 years. That's 86% in the next 2 years that plan on using generative AI in some form, and that over half of them reported that their biggest barrier is a lack of skilled workers needed to scale their AI initiatives. So stepping up a level here and kind of talking about AI in general and some of the trends in the industry, you've probably heard a lot about automation of repetitive tasks. That seems to be an underlying theme of generative AI and AI in general. The idea that we're going to take the mundane, the repetitive, and have a computer do that so that we free up humans to focus on higher value work. Then, of course, you've got AI-powered analytics, the ability of taking mass amounts of data and doing what humans just can't possibly do manually to help lead data-driven decision-making. You have your chatbots and virtual assistants, the ability for customer service especially, to have these natural language processing models be able to handle routine customer inquiries, letting humans do the more complex work, and even having them do personalized recommendations. You have AI auditing and fraud detection, algorithms that can continuously monitor for anomalies and suspicious transactions that could indicate fraud or compliance issues, and obviously augment the whole auditing process. Predictive modeling has been around for a while, and the ability for machine learning techniques to build these models, to forecast future needs, to do things like predicting downtime for machines, to anticipate customer churn, or a series of all kinds of other metrics that impact business operations. Of course, computer vision and the ability to AI to do image recognition and to process documents, analyze defects and visual inspections, and automate that traditionally manual visual process. And of course, the main reason we're here today is natural language generation, the ability of AI to generate well-written content for things like financial reports, legal documents, and business proposals, all to theoretically enhance productivity. So we're listening to a technical presentation, so of course we got to have a bunch of acronyms, and we want to, out of the dozens of acronyms out there, I wanted to kind of highlight the ones that you'll hear a lot today, and you'll hear if you're in this space, and it's important to have an understanding of what they are, because they impact your ability to deploy this and understand what to do. So beyond the ones listed on this page, you're also going to have things like LLM, which stands for large language model, machine learning, which is ML, natural language processing, of course, is NLP, and things like IoT or Internet of Things. The key takeaway from this page and these definitions is that the current iteration of this technology is not your Terminator android coming to take over the world. That form of AI, or artificial general intelligence, AGI, is still theoretical, and whether that is 5 months from now, 5 years, 50 years, or 500 years, or ever, is kind of yet to be determined, and it has a lot to do with how people define what that actually means. So AI, of course, the definition there is basically talking about computer science, where we have machines that perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. AGI I just mentioned, and generative AI, of course, being the ability to pre-train and train a model on existing data so that it can generate new data, is basically what that's getting to. You're going to see the term GPT a lot, especially now that OpenAI this week at their developer conference have announced the ability of all of us to create our own GPT engines. And you're going to see Salesforce use that term. And of course, there's ChatGPT. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, the type of language model that allows that's used for natural language processing tasks. And it's the concept there is, and the important part of that is the pre-trained part. It's taking data and pre-training it so that it can then develop the answers that we're all used to seeing. The last one on the list here, RLHF, I put on here because it's important to realize that there's still humans in this loop. Machine learning techniques, where an algorithm learns through trial and error is important, but it also still needs to receive human feedback. There are literally rooms of people around the world that will look at the result of a ChatGPT or other engine's query and say, yes, that's the correct answer, or no, that's the wrong answer. And that has a lot to do with my belief, at least, that we're not really near generative AGI yet, because these computers and the results don't really have any awareness or understanding of what it is that they're spitting out. It's all math and vector indexes, as we'll talk about, that are determining what the next word is. And it's very clever and very smart, and it does amazing things, but it's not truly intelligent yet. Mm-hmm. And the second to last one there, I put on there because I think it's very important as you try to decide whether you're using a language model that you're pre-training on all your data, versus using a Copilot, which we'll talk a lot about today, where you're augmenting your search or your query to allow you to get a different answer. And one of the biggest concerns and one of the issues we'll talk about today with this technology is the area around security. And by using retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, it allows us to get past some of that, because it doesn't use that data that's not in the model. It doesn't use it for additional training. One way that I like to describe how to understand what retrieval augmented generation, and the analogy I like to use is using a library. So if you went into a library and you just saw stacks of books everywhere, there was no librarian, there was no indexing, and you had to train on everything in that library in order to get an answer to anything, that is one way of doing it, and that's really what a language model does. With retrieval augmented generation, you would walk into the library, you would explain to the librarian, I'm looking for X. They would show you the one book. You would look through that book, find the answer. You would augment what you're doing with what you already knew, and that comes up with your end results. That retrieval augmented generation is the key to a lot of what we're seeing with Copilots and the effectiveness of this for security and everything else. So that's why I kind of make that an important point to understand at this point in our education. So there are literally thousands of AI products on the market, with new ones coming every day. I'm going to focus on another aspect of generative AI software, and that is AI being embedded into the software you already use. It's important as you invest in AI software that you are wary of narrowly focused functionality that may be incorporated into larger suites. Just this week, OpenAI announced a new feature, a series of new features and APIs for their ChatGPT, and many AI startups are scrambling to see if they are viable anymore. I do predict myself that 10 years from now, there will not only be some of the current big names in tech, such as Microsoft, Google, etc., but new players that no one even knows today. So on the top of this list, we've got the primary AI chatbots, the ChatGPT that hopefully everybody's heard of from OpenAI. We have Claude from Anthropic. We have Bing from Microsoft and Bard from Google. We will dive deeper into these a little bit later in the presentation. You undoubtedly have heard the term Copilot or assistant in relation to generative AI, and I separate these on this slide due to the vast difference in functionality between what I am labeling as platform copilots versus application copilots. Copilots utilize that term we defined earlier called retrieval augmented generation. By using this technique, one of the hurdles of adoption of generative AI, security of your data, is handled, since data retrieved this way is not used to train LLMs. Platform copilots come with a per user cost to them, whereas many of the application copilots are included in the upper license tiers of those applications. And as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. Currently, most of those application copilots are very specific in what they can accomplish, and they do not gain access to the full generative AI experience that a platform copilot does. They are still very useful, and they will only continue to grow in usefulness as the vendors add additional use case functionality to them. So the platform copilots that I'm talking about are things like Microsoft 365 Copilot that was released last week, and that's for all of you that are Microsoft Office or 365 users. If you're a Google Workplace user, then Google has a similar product called Duet. And for Salesforce users, they have their Einstein platform. Now, within the individual products, for Microsoft, you have the Dynamics 365, and they have a Copilot for everything: sales, customer service, customer insight, field service, finance, business central, etc. And those have very specific focused functionality within their product. And if you have the higher tier of version of each of those, it's included for free in your product. Salesforce is the same way. They have a sales, what they originally called GPT, and I guess they went away from that. Now I think it's called AI. So sales AI, service AI, Slack AI, et cetera, and it's the same kind of thing. It's embedded into the product, and new features will come out all the time. NetSuite, last week, I think it was, or a week and a half ago, they had their annual conference, and they've gone a different route. They've decided to partner with a company called Cohere that you probably never heard of before last year. That's one of those newer AI companies, and they're going to use their language model in order to enable Copilot-like features in NetSuite. So beyond the application suites like NetSuite and Business Central and Finance and Operations and all the others, you also have one of the earlier uses of generative AI, and that has to do with helping programmers. So GitHub, which is Microsoft's GitHub Copilot's been around since very early this year, and that gives programmers the ability to use a Copilot generative AI tool to help them code. Einstein has a similar product for their product, for their suite. And then Microsoft Power Apps and Power Automate also have low code or no code Copilots to help you with those tools. And the final item on here is Microsoft Security Copilot, which is around the security suite of products within Microsoft, and to help those technicians use a generative AI tool to make their job easier. So on this, I chart kind of slides I've got here. What I've done, and this is a never-ending, ongoing, very difficult to keep up type of listing of all the features of the main chatbots that are out there. I've got on the left, I've got the ChatGPT products, the Claude, the Bard, and the Ming. Across the top, I've got different features and functionality. And basically, the colors are meant to be, if it's green, that means it's really good. If it's almost green, it's not quite as good. And if it's white, it means it doesn't have that particular feature, or I consider it not to be a good attribute. So the bottom line of all of this, and I've talked about this many times in many different conferences and discussions, right now, with the release of what OpenAI has announced with ChatGPT, there's really little reason to go with anything with ChatGPT. Claude is done a great thing, and their one advantage was that their token limit was at 100,000. And of course, OpenAI just released today or this week saying they're going to 128,000. Bard has got issues, and Google's supposed to be coming out with a new version of all this. And when it does, it may change the landscape. But as of today, the ChatGPT 4, which is $20 a month, if you don't want to pay that, you just want to go with the free version, the ChatGPT 3.5 is very powerful, but you're going to lose the ability to do image creation and analysis and a lot of the other features. It does allow you to search the internet as part of what it does indirectly. There is a Chrome extension you can add if you use Google Chrome as your browser, and then it will do searching across the internet to make sure that it's current, etc. One of the issues with all of these, because they're pre-trained, is pre-trained through when? If you don't have internet capabilities to search current information, what you're asking it to do may come back with dated information. The ChatGPT had been up through 2021, and as of their most recent release, it's going to be through April of this year, and they've promised to keep it more up to date. But there's still a need. If it's something that's happening this week, this month, the last 3 months, you still want to be able to access the internet. And so that's an important feature, I believe, in all of these. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something hopefully you've heard about called prompt engineering. This is one of those new skills that enables you to take full advantage of this generative AI tool. I've spoken to many people that have, quote unquote, tried one of these chatbots, fed it a Google-like prompt, and gotten an unimpressive result. So they basically said, it doesn't do anything, and they gave up. Prompt engineering is a skill, and there is an art to it. Structuring your prompt clearly and precisely will produce clear and precise results. So one way of looking at how you create a good prompt is through the concept of a prompt, of persona, priming, and then prompting. A good prompt will typically involve setting the stage so that the AI understands your intent and desired output. This can be accomplished through these three broad categories of personas, priming, and prompting. So a persona is are potential fictional profiles representing different user types. So you might say something like, you are a seasoned CFO at a large manufacturing company. To tell the engine to use data that a seasoned CFO in a manufacturing industry might have access to help ground more the result that you're going to get back out of it. Priming is a technique that provides additional context or information to the model before you give it the main prompt to help guide it to a specific response. So you might say something like, with your innovative approaches to managing cash flow in manufacturing business, and then prompt it with something. Or from your perspective as a leader in streamlining global supply chains for manufacturing, and then give it a prompt. So the whole idea is, who do you want it to act like? What is the more specific detail and focus that you want it to give? And then you have to give it the actual prompt. So you might give it an example. or give a tone of how you want it to respond. So write using a professional tone or use a friendly tone in your response. You may want to format the results so that you don't just get a blob of run-on information, and you want to control how long the information is. So you might say, write your response in 500 or fewer words. Or you might say, output your results as a table with the following columns, A, B, and C, and write in plain English without acronyms or jargon. And then you might give it extras. I do this as a part of my customer or my personal instructions that I give the ChatGPT. I always say, explain your thinking before you actually output what you're going to output. That way, I understand at the very beginning, did my prompt make sense to the engine? So when it comes back, I'm going to start doing this, this, and this. I'm going to do this analysis. If it's completely off base, then I know to stop it and reprompt it and give it better information. So when you go to prompt, there are a variety of different frameworks besides the one I just mentioned, and these are kind of broad categories. Do I give it one large prompt? And I've seen some amazing things where you can give it a whole dissertation of what you want it to do, and if you're very good at doing that and very clear, you can get a very good result. Other people take a more step-by-step approach where they use what's called prompt chaining. You just give it very simple, concrete questions of what you're trying to do one after another, and you chain those prompts together. I think most people end up with the hybrid approach, which is more what I'm doing, where I might prime the prompt with when I'm a CFO and I'm trying to do this, and then here are my steps, and then ask it more questions to get to my final answer. So I think that hybrid approach is probably what most people will use. And token limits, which I mentioned a little bit with the ChatGPT or the other bots, is an important thing to understand. So a token, some people use the term kind of like a syllable in a word. It's not exactly that. It's how they break up the prompt that you're giving it and the results so that it knows how to figure out with vector indexes what it's doing. There are limits. The Bing has a 4,000 character limit only, and the free version of ChatGPT is 8,000. And now the paid version is 128,000, and Claude is also 100,000. But even that, you can run into limits, and that's where you'll sometimes get these incomplete results, or it'll seem like it forgot what you started talking about. So it's important to always start a new session when you're starting a new topic so that you don't intermingle unrelated information. And again, you got to watch when you're inputting your prompts that you don't run out of the token limits that are existing. This was only going to increase through time. Again, the first ones were 4,000 and 8,000. Now they're up to 128,000, which is like I think they said it's like a 600-page book or something like that that you could basically input as a prompt nowadays. So here are some examples. So the first one here, learn any complex topic in just a few minutes. And an example might be explain something like passive activity loss in simple and easy terms that any beginner can understand. So I'd like to divert a little bit here to a story, a personal story of mine that it kind of gives a new take on what prompt engineering and really the concept behind this whole generative AI. So one of the realities of technology and anything new is that there are many different points of view about whether it does more harm than good, or if the best thing, or it's the best thing that has ever happened, and of course everything in between. Like most information gained in our lives, the source of that information can heavily determine your current point of view. Case in point is my 85-year-old mother. All she knew about AI was that her principal AI strategist's son, what he could mention to her in passing, and what she heard in the news. The perspective had her pretty negative about AI, since most of the current news, such as 60 Minutes, has been slanted towards all that could possibly happen negatively with this tech and very little about what it can do for the good. So while I was visiting her recently and going through the typical list for Ray to do while you're here list, I was helping her regain access to her online medical app. Being elderly, she of course has many doctor appointments, and the summaries of those are available to her in her app, which she likes to get to since the information is posted much faster than her doctors tend to get back to her about. The issue is those summaries tend to be in doctor talk and not easily understood by the rest of us. So I installed the mobile version of ChatGPT on her phone, and we went to one of her summarized summaries, and I took a picture of the text, and then I asked GPT to explain the text in terms that were simple to understand, as if I was a third grader. It came back with something like this. Imagine you have a house with 4 rooms. 2 of the rooms are normal in size and 2 of the rooms are larger than normal. One of the rooms has a door that is only supposed to allow things to enter, but sometimes it allows things to go the other direction as well. Your house also has one room with a door that has a chalky residue on it that it shouldn't. So what does this mean? This means my mother has a heart with 2 enlarged chambers and a faulty valve with regurgitation and another valve with some calcium buildup. That she understood and immediately changed her overall attitude on what AI can be. This subsequently triggered a call from my brother a few days later that never wants to do anything related to technology, and suddenly he wants me to train him on how to use this stuff, since he works for a tech magazine that is all about AI but knows nothing about AI. Apparently, my mom has relayed this story to him. Bottom line, as we will discover some today, is that there are positive and negative issues with any technology, but ignoring it entirely due to any side of this without knowing both sides, probably not a good idea. So, finishing up the rest of these examples, I like to tell that story because I think it's important to understand there's points of view, positive, negative about this technology that can help us move forward. So let's continue with these examples. Get ChatGPT to write in your style. So you can say something like analyze the writing style from the text below and write a 200-word piece on something like semantic indices. So that you would, and this is one of the things I hear all the time. Well, it doesn't sound like me, so why would I use this? But if you've written things that sound like you can say, hey, this is my style. Write everything you respond to me so it sounds like this style. And you give it a document you've written that you are proud of and like, and then it will format its response like your style. You can train respond to customer emails. You're a customer service rep dealing with a customer upset about a late delivery, write a 100-word apology email offering a discount. You can train ChatGPT to generate prompts for you. So pick what you are. So I'm an AI designed to help CFOs. Generate a list of the 10 best prompts. The prompt should be about, and pick one of the things you're working on, annual budget planning. Ask ChatGPT to help you become better at, and it doesn't have to be ChatGPT. All of these could be used in all the other ones as well. Create a beginner's guide. Topics should include prompts, priming, and personas. Include examples. The guide should be no longer than X words. And eliminate writer's block. I'm writing a blog about current trends in data and analytics. I can't come up with a catchy title. Give me a list of 5 suggestions for the blog title for this piece. And then typically I follow it up with, give me 5 more and give me 25 more because the first 5 weren't something that I liked. The bottom line on prompting is that you need to learn how to communicate with the large language model in a way that mirrors the intent of the content you wish it to build. Prompting as you might do a Google or Bing search will not bring back a concise and accurate response. There are numerous courses, including by us here at Sikich, that can be tailored to your company in its roles, since how you might prompt these LLMs will vary by your role and intent. There are also many publicly available quote-unquote cheat sheets on prompting to get you started, and I would recommend creating a location such as a Microsoft Teams or a SharePoint site to store commonly used and effective prompts so that you and your colleagues can learn from each other. So you may have heard the term hallucinations. I prefer the word confabulations since hallucinations imply intent and thinking. GPT models use something called vector indexes to determine the next word in a sequence, such as peanut butter and jelly would be the next word, most common, and because mathematically it is, that's how it knows to pick that word. And when a logical next word is not available, it will fill it in a mathematically correct next word that may have nothing to do with what you're trying to get it to do. This is what people think is a hallucination, but in fact is a lack of useful data in that context. And I want to stress that last piece because that's the theme of this whole thing, the lack of useful data in that context. Beyond technical vector index issues, since the source of these tools, such as ChatGPT, is primarily the internet, and the internet is chock full of inaccuracies and just plain wrong information, these tools may confidently respond with incorrect answers and even incomplete nonsense. Your responses should always be fact-checked before making any decisions or, of course, publishing any response. So beyond that, the items listed here are all potential downsides that we need to be aware of. So generative AI tools can sometimes produce unpredictable, uncontrollable outputs, which can lead to unintended consequences. That's lack of control. And like any system that's AI-based, generative AI tools may be influenced by the data used to train them. leading to potential biases in their output. And of course, the use of AI generating content can raise ethical concerns, particularly around issues like plagiarism, authorship, and ownership, which of course has been in media a lot. The accuracy of generative AI tools can be variable depending on the quality, again, of the training data and the complexity of the task. While generative AI tools can produce large volumes of text, the quality of that text may not fit what you're trying to do. And human-like errors. The data used to train the models was created by humans. Humans make mistakes. They have errors in logic or reasoning. Of course, that means this could have the same thing. The use of generative AI tools for generating sensitive or confidential information can pose security risks, particularly if the generated content falls into the wrong hands. And then costs. Some generative AI tools can be expensive to develop and maintain, particularly those that require large amounts of computing power. And the use of generative AI tools can be complex and require specialized expertise, which may be difficult for some organizations to obtain. And then the final one, AI can't solve every problem in the world. They can be useful for a lot of things, but it may not be applicable or effective for what you're trying to generate. That brings us to the concept of responsible AI system design and development, which companies such as Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, and Sikich, and others are, of course, emphasizing as we approach this. So collect data that is representative and diverse. Ensure that the data is collected ethically and with the informed consent of the individuals providing it. Be transparent about how the data will be used and who will have access to it. I think we would all agree that some of this initially maybe hasn't been done by some of these big companies. Choose a model that is appropriate for the task. Consider the trade-offs between accuracy, fairness, and cost, and ensure that the model is not biased against any particular group of people. Be transparent about how the system works. Document the algorithm used and make it available to others for review. Explain the reasoning behind the decision made by the system. What we don't want to see is the CEO of some of these big companies saying, well, how does it exactly get to the end result? And they say, well, we're not really sure, because that's just going to make people very nervous. Ensure that the AI system can be easily interpreted and understood by humans. This will help build trust, like I just said. Continuously evaluate the performance of the system and make improvements. Monitor for bias and errors and adjust accordingly. Consider the ethical implications and its impact on society. Make sure the system is designed and developed with ethical considerations in mind, and it's not used to perpetuate harm or discrimination. And of course, the final one, and probably as important as all the rest, is keep humans in the loop. Do not hand over the keys to the AI system completely. So let's dive a little bit into the ethical considerations of generative AI. So privacy. AI has the ability to collect and analyze vast amounts of personal data, which raises concerns about privacy. As they become more advanced and sophisticated, they may be able to collect and analyze increasingly sensitive information about individuals and companies, including their location, behaviors, personal preferences, which of course raises the questions about who owns that data, who has access to it, and how is it being used. AI systems are only as objective as the data they are trained on. If the data used to train the system is biased or discriminatory, then of course the system will perpetuate those biases in its outputs. That can lead to unfair or unjust outcomes, and this is a particular area of concern in HR systems, lending systems, and criminal justice. Now, you're going to a generative AI session, you've got to hear the phrase, AI won't replace you, but a person using AI might. And that has to do with job displacement. So, of course, one of the potential impacts is the displacement of human workers through automation. AI has the huge potential to create new job opportunities, but it also may lead to significant job losses in certain industries, particularly those that rely heavily on routine and repetitive tasks. That's where training and upskilling becomes so important to minimize that as much as possible. AI systems can be complex, which can make it difficult to understand how they are making decisions, who is responsible for their actions. This raises very important questions about accountability, transparency, especially in areas of industries such as healthcare, finance, and law enforcement. You cannot say, well, the AI told me to do it. You need to be accountable for what AI is producing, and you, the human, makes the decision. And of course, safety. AI systems become more autonomous and capable of making decisions on their own, there is a risk that they may cause harm to humans or the environment. This raises important questions about how to ensure the safety and reliability of systems, particularly in autonomous vehicles and robotics. So I'm going to pass it back to Laurel here, and she'll kind of summarize where we've gotten to this point.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of information there, and we are halfway home. So just kind of a quick recap. We looked at the history of AI, defined generative AI, and some of the related terms. Built out our foundation for emphasizing the need to move towards adoption and not take the wait and kind of see approach. We highlighted products and add-on AI services that the main vendors have been building, and explain the need to learn prompt engineering to effectively use generative AI. And lastly, walk through the ethical considerations, responsible AI design and development, and issues to be aware of. So what does this mean for you? And what Ray's going to talk about next is the uses of generative AI that you're able to accomplish today.
Thank you, Laura. So as she said, we're going to talk a bit here about what could you do right after you finish this webinar today that would be productive. So we are recording this Teams meeting right now. And when I first saw this, I was just, to me, it was a game changer being in the consulting field. Anybody that goes to meetings and has to report to somebody else about a meeting, imagine a scenario where after every single meeting, you get a concise, clear picture of exactly what was said and any follow-ups that need to happen after that, and you can send it 5 minutes after the meeting is complete. Instead of how most of us live our lives of meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, so you don't have time to think about what you just had. You have your scribbles of your notes, and then maybe at the end of the day, maybe at the end of the week, you try to go back and remember, what did we talk about and what was I supposed to follow up on? Now there's really no excuse. You'll have those summaries and be able to follow up, and you'll look like a hero. So to me, that is a key type of feature, and you can think about that functionality throughout others. But this is something you could do today if you have Teams Premium. The other items on this list, things like the ability to answer questions, customer questions, training, something on for technical support. Again, if you're in any kind of company, especially a consulting company, to be able to respond and be prompted by a chatbot. Data analysis. This is one of the most amazing features of this tool. I think the ability to give it, like I described with my mother's example, I gave it just a screenshot of text, and it's able to analyze that and come back with a result. To be able to give it a balance sheet, or to give it a series of sales summary for 5 years of sales, and have it build a chart for you and come up with different type of analysis. It's amazing what it's able to do today. Obviously, in that type of analysis, it's important to understand that if you do submit that data to a public ChatGPT type of product, that it potentially could use for training. So you got to be careful about scraping off any customer names and things like that, or use a product like Bing Enterprise or ChatGPT Enterprise or Microsoft 365 Copilot, which has the security built in, so it does not ever make that available for training. Then obviously the next one is one of the first things people started doing and are still doing a lot of, the ability to create marketing materials such as blogs, social media posts, website content, do research and information gathering, doing that upskilling we talked about. Imagine the normal process of a person starting in a company, trying to learn what the company does, trying to learn if it's consulting or if it's any kind of business, and having to go talk to somebody to figure that out, and too nervous to ask the question because maybe I'm supposed to already know that. Having a tool that you can ask that question and get an answer quickly is again a game changer to narrow the gap between that first year and that 5-year consultant or person or expert, and narrowing that quicker. In the area of networking and security, doing risk assessments, monitoring logs, detecting anomalies, automating routine tasks. And then for the programmers in the room, using a product like GitHub and the other products that are similar to it to help you explain, improve, write, debug, comment, and translate your code, help you to write test cases, generate test data. That's been That's been very helpful for me in the consulting world, and then the ability to generate documentation and even doing training materials. So this is just a short snippet of the kind of things that we're doing here at Sikich, and we're having customers do today without, this is not like 5 years from now, maybe we'll be able to do this. This is things we could do right today. So how do you get there? So one of the initial tasks as a firm is to gain an understanding of these technical challenges and how to move the needle. One step in that process is assessing your own AI maturity. So are you foundational, meaning you're questioning what AI is and how it can be applied? Your company has low digitization, basic analytical capabilities. Or are you approaching, meaning you're hopeful on AI and what it has to offer? You've started some digitization, you're looking to increase and optimize your processes, you're a little cautious about disruption. Or maybe you're aspirational. You've experimented and applied some AI, very highly digitized. You want new business models. You've achieved a whole culture around data. And that's key to that third level there, is that you understand the value of data, the cleanliness of data, and you have a process to make sure it stays that way. And then mature, you have data science emerging with operational capabilities. You understand the model lifecycle management, and on your way to building a foundational data architecture. This just helps with anybody you might be working with to help you understand, are you at the very beginning, or are you at the very end, or somewhere, like most of us are somewhere in the middle, so you understand where to put your money and your time. So when deciding to embark on any AI deployment, it is important to understand challenges that can be encountered and the opportunities that the proper team can provide to get past them. So unrealistic expectations can be an issue. It's important to clearly identify your objective and in enough detail to be successful. Complete AI solutions can have a very high computational cost. You need to determine not only your upfront costs, but ongoing costs to ensure the outcomes provide an ROI. As mentioned earlier, if incomplete or invalid data is a source for your algorithm, the results will not be as desired. And of course, I also mentioned earlier, data is only as current as the last time it was trained, so it can become stale. And AI can't solve all the world's problems, and some things you would think it would be very good at, like math, it's not all that good at unless you have a very specifically trained model for that. Results are not always clear and may require multiple prompts. That's interpretability. We've mentioned token limits. There's 8,000 for GPT-3 and now 128,000 and 100,000 for GPT-4 and Claude. The ability to keep state. And this is really, I think, the next big change that we're going to see in these models. Every time I hit start, it forgets everything I ever told it before. So it's, human beings, they remember, some of us less than others, I guess, as we get older, but they remember what their past experiences are. And the model remembers what it was trained on, but doesn't remember what you told it. It only remembers the last thing until you hit restart. So the ability to build a database to store that, so it remembers and grows with you and learns with you, I think that's an enhancer we're going to see in the future. Garbage in, garbage out, of course, data quality and availability. You want to build something for an industry, but there's no industry metrics that you can get a hold of. So how are you going to build that? And then, of course, the ethical concerns of bias, prejudice, and copyrights. These are all things that can be worked around with a team that understands how to work around them. So when discussing AI, it's important to recognize that AI is a very broad field, encompassing a diverse array of technologies tailored to different needs and use cases. And as exciting and interesting as generative AI is currently, other forms of AI that have been available for much longer should also be considered with a focus on how these technologies can work together. So predictive analytics, the ability of machine learning to use algorithms to learn from data, improve without explicit programming, or business intelligence, which, a bunch of fancy reports, basically systems that can collect, analyze, and present business information. And of course, IoT, putting devices on your machines and producing that kind of data. So if you think about what we were talking about here is data, data, data. It's important to have good data in order to the generative AI models to be able to make good decisions. These are sources of that data. Your machine learning algorithm data, your business intelligence reports, your IoT data, and it's the convergence of a natural language processing model to be able to talk to these other technologies that is really I think, the exciting part but you need all of these to be working in order to obviously work with them together. So what do we do to get there? So I've come up with this kind of acronym, if you will. Got to have another acronym in technology for Sikich. And so the first step we would say is you got to develop a strategy that aligns with your mission and vision. And then, of course, get your data in order. Once that's, then you need to identify or recognize your areas where AI can add the most value. You can't do it all at once, and that's incremental below. Knowledge, well, you're doing that today. Invest in education and upskilling. Use these tools to help educate yourself and your people so they can get upskilled to do more creative things and take away the mundane. Take an incremental approach. Don't do it all at once. Have easy, identifiable projects that can show success so that you get the buy-in from everybody in the company. Comply. Make sure you follow all regulations and secure your data. Establish an acceptable use policy, and we'll see that here in a minute. And then human-centric, of course, make sure humans are always in the loop. So this is kind of an overall strategy of how you should get started. A lot of you that are using the products we've talked about today are considering and talking about copilots. And so steps you should take at the high level to make sure that you're ready for a copilot scenario, because Microsoft announced went live last week with their Microsoft 365 Copilot, but it's only for enterprises with the EA agreements and 300 licenses. So it's kind of out of reach for a lot of us until it comes down market, and it will. Next year, they will release a way for you to purchase this without having to buy 300 licenses. So what do you do in the meantime? One of the things is get in the cloud. The software you're using, whether it's Microsoft or Google or NetSuite or one of those products, make sure that the software you have is in the cloud, because some of those still are available on premise and it's just not going to work unless it's in the cloud. Make sure the licensing you have, whether it's Office or Microsoft 365 or it's Google or Salesforce, et cetera, make sure it's at the level that supports the copilots that are coming out, so you get the prerequisite licensing. And of course, there's that data again. Get to work on standardizing your data. Remove duplicates, remove your outdated material, properly tag, et cetera. And of course, identify your security needs. Make sure that you have security profiles set up so that somebody creative with prompt engineering isn't going to get the salary of the CEO because nobody secured it properly. So we've talked about data. So what exactly is bad data? So we look at structured data housed in a database with column names is the type of data that has been a problem for those systems in AI forever. Unstructured data, of course, is not tagged and consistent is where generative AI and other AI systems really have an issue. So when you think about your ERP system, your CRM system, et cetera, those are tables. It says customer, it says customer name, it says address, phone number. They're already data typed. It already has a column for that name. So the type of problems you have there are things like missing values. So you might have a research database with ages that are missing in columns. You might have outlier data, financial transactions where the average is $1,000 and there's one of them in there for $1 million that somebody maybe typed incorrectly. You have inconsistent data, CRM system where the same customer is listed under different IDs. And then I think one of the more important ones is the lack of master data. Not knowing which piece of data is the master record or which system that houses your data is the system of record. In other words, having 10 different systems that customer lives in, and no one of them is the system of record. So the different addresses, different phone numbers, slightly different names. And so how do you possibly have an AI use that data? Incorrect data. And this is more on capturing this at the entry point. But what if somebody enters into a sales database 500, but they meant 5,000? So having those kind of controls. And then duplicate data, of course, inventory where the same product listed multiple times. So I think structured data is easier to get our head wrapped around because, again, it's tables and columns and formatting. Unstructured data is a little more difficult because you have things like noise, unnecessary data. Let's say you scrape the internet, a web page, and on that has a bunch of ads, and that becomes part of your data. That's just noise that doesn't need to be there. Or it's ambiguous, data with multiple interpretations. So if you have custom reviews that you're trying to store and it has sarcasm, it may not be clear what it's actually saying. Low resolution. Maybe you've got facial recognition data, model data, and you've trained it on blurry pictures, so it's not going to do very well on high resolution pictures. Incomplete. So maybe you've got data like a tweet or a database of tweets that are cut off, and it skews the whole sentiment analysis that you're trying to do. Or irrelevant data. When we talk about sentiment analysis, all your training data is on technical manuals. That's not going to be very useful when you're trying to do sentiment analysis. So the final thing here, I mentioned acceptable use policy. This is kind of a framework for acceptable use policies that we here use at Sikich, and we recommend to customers, making sure you define the proper use and prohibited use of generative AI tools. So make sure you proof everything before you go and use it anywhere else. Make sure you edit. You don't just copy and paste what you're getting. It's a starting point, as I mentioned, the fourth one there. You fact check. You don't know that it's correct. This is where having experts that can QA the results and make sure that what's there, and you're using it for summarization, et cetera, but you have an expert who understands that it's right or wrong, becomes important. Transparency. Make sure that if you're going to use AI, you say you're using AI. Don't try to pass it off as if you're doing that work. Data privacy. Review the terms of service of the software that you're using. Are they going to use your data for training? Are they going to divulge when it's being sold to other people? That kind of thing. And of course, security, making sure that you aren't putting data in there that is going to become public knowledge. And then prohibitive use of core, these are pretty blatantly obvious, I would hope, but don't reenact someone without consent. Don't do illegal things, follow the laws, don't compromise the security of your company, don't share confidential sensitive material, and don't harass people. So we believe that everyone should come up and get your lawyers involved. There's all kinds of examples on the internet too. Start with something, and then every couple of months, 3 months, you should check and change it, because the industry, of course, is changing fast. So here we are at the end. We hopefully, during this session, has given you a good overview, a definition of what generative AI is and isn't, and how it fits into the larger world of AI in general. So what we've done today is we've defined the AI and its related technologies, where they came from and current trends. We've discussed the business initiatives around Gen AI. We've dipped our toes in the prompt engineering pool, discussed potential issues with the technology, and listed various ways to utilize Gen AI today. We discussed how to assess your maturity in AI and potential deployment pitfalls. We've discussed emphasizing that AI is much more than generative AI, provide a list of next first steps in your AI journey, and define what we mean by bad data, and then provided a framework for an acceptable use policy. I will now pass it back to Laura, who will discuss potential next steps for you on your generative AI journey.
Perfect. Thank you. So I realize this is a lot, and it's being able to wrap your head around all of it is probably take a little follow-up, but that's kind of where we come in. So how can Sikich help me figure this out and find opportunities? What's possible for our company or for our needs? And I know there's a lot of trends out there. Some of those we talked about. There are probably some things that you might have already dabbled in. But really, our goal is to figure out the right strategy and approach and tools for you. What we are sharing on the screen here, there are a number of different assessments and workshops that we have in place to help realize, current state and, getting you set up for, the art of really what's possible. So, and at the bottom, I know that we're going to share this, and there are links that will give more detail around the workshops and what those entail. And if we can go to the next screen. So as Ray mentioned today, we've focused on generative AI, and like I said, as he mentioned, that achieving great results requires great data. So, you know, having AI within our data and analytics practice was just a natural evolution, and to best support our partners and take you from where you are to where you want to be. So this slide reads from the foundation up and really highlights the journey to AI success. It all starts with developing an enterprise data strategy, establishing the right governance, creating single versions of the truth. And I know everybody is going to be probably at a different place on that journey, and maybe you're already there, but it's with that strong foundation that you can modernize your information management capabilities, develop that data fluency, and implement intelligent automation with AI. So each step on this journey adds real incremental value to your business and to your customers, and those are measurable outcomes that we'll certainly work with you on, and lockstep with each other every step of the way. So just wanted to give kind of a high level on that. And, again, this is the first of a series of webinars to come. So I will turn it back to you, Ray.
Thank you. So this last slide here is just a way for me to leave you with a page of links. These are the various newsletters, blogs, et cetera, that I read on a regular basis. It's a great way. Many of them are like 5-10 minute type of things. And if you kind of catch them once a week kind of thing, or if you do it every day, this kind of gives you a way to keep up on what's going on. As we're at the end of time here, if anybody does have any questions and they want to throw those in Q&A, again, we'll answer those, and it's part of our response. And as I said at the very beginning, this is the first of a foundation of knowledge webinars that we're doing, and we plan on having an ongoing series of shorter update format, 15-20 minute kind of things every few months to catch everyone up on what's changed. And then so in addition to that, we also will have, in other words, stay tuned for not only this ongoing series, but additional webinars on related AI and data analytics topics in the future. So thank you all for attending and traveling with us on our generative AI journey, and we hope to see you again soon.